Good Friday morning, and welcome to this week's episode of Finding God in the Dark, the podcast. My name is Don Stevens, serving Asbury UMC in Woodstown, New Jersey, and St. John's UMC in Harrisonville, New Jersey.
And I'm Jonathan Campbell. I'm the pastor of Lacey United Methodist Church in Forked River.
And today we have gone off of the beaten path for us a little bit. We are watching a new movie that really literally just came out last week called Conclave. So it's a 2024 film, rated PG. That was nice. A film for adults that was not rated R.
Yeah.
It stars Ralph Fiennes, Stanley Tucci, John Lithgow, among others. Isabella Rossellini.
Yeah.
It's directed by Edward Berger. Based on a book by Robert Harris of the same name. Basic premise of the film is that, obviously fictional story, the Pope has died. The College of Cardinals has gathered to elect a new Pope.
Yeah.
And go.
Yeah.
I mean, we had to start off with the spoiler part, right?
Yeah. Spoiler.
So understand, if you watch us regularly, we generally, if a film is a little older, we don't want to spoil it, or we do spoil it. We don't care because if it's 5 years or more older, you should have seen it by now.
Yes.
If it's brand new, we don't really want to spoil the ending for you. But this film, we are not going to spoil the ending, the very ending. But there are some things we'll have to talk about leading up to. So be aware that there are some things that are spoiler-ish.
So feel free to stop watching us, go watch the movie, and then come back.
You could do that. In fact, if you enjoy well acted, well written, great cinematography, suspense type of films,
it's a very good movie. It's a very good
absolutely
movie.
Absolutely. I 100%. It is well done. I think Ralph Fiennes will probably get an Oscar nod for this.
Yeah, my guess. Yeah, there's some buzz talk about Oscars for this. So
I think the cinematography will probably be nominated. I think it's a good film.
Mm-hmm.
I think we talked a little bit ahead of time, and Jonathan and I are in slightly different places, but surprisingly not as far apart as I thought we might be. Considering the ultimate, where the film ultimately goes. But do we want to talk? What do we want to talk about first? Can we, let's put this out of the way. This is a popular film already.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Both of us saw it at a matinee.
Yep.
On a Tuesday.
Yes.
And the theater was packed.
Yes.
And we both said the same thing, that we think we might have been the youngest people in the theater.
Yes, I was at least one of the youngest people in the theater, yes.
Yep. Well, for me, that's an accomplishment. I'm 60, man.
Trust me, it's getting harder and harder for me, too. Yeah, there were a lot of senior citizens. I mean, literally, I told you this, I'll tell the audience, probably it's the most packed theater I've been in for years. Like,
at least since 2019, right?
Yeah.
At
before
least.
COVID, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. So it was it's a good film.
Yeah.
It is it's worth watching and making your own mind up. We're going to talk about themes more than we're going to talk about the actual meat of the film so much. So
it's basically a procedural without a lot of action. I mean, it's essentially a bunch of riddles and mysteries that the main character, Ray Fiennes, has to figure out as he's going through.
It's a as my kids would say, it's a talkie movie.
Yes, it's a talkie movie. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So and the other part of it, I will say, is it's probably no coincidence that it came out the week before the election. Because it's about an election of a new pope.
Yeah.
And in a very real sense, it is a political intrigue film.
Well, again, it's this powerful reminder because I didn't check the exact date, but I know they have been doing this kind of structure to select a pope for about 1,000 years, and so it's just a deep reminder that this kind of ancient practice is still filled with politics and still filled with this kind of desire to make sure your side wins and the other side loses. And unfortunately, that seeps into everywhere, including the church sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would say if right now, if you are very, very tired of political commentary and political commercials, that maybe skip this and wait for video or something.
Yeah.
If you like good films, I think it's worth seeing.
Yeah.
Understand that what you're going into is a lot of what you're seeing in real life right now. So
Mhm.
that's just being above board, right?
Yeah.
So let's jump into some themes here. What do you want to talk about first?
Well, did you did it keep kind of drawing you back to the Methodist church's kind of divide? Did it make you think about kind of the inward fights of our denomination?
Yeah. I think yeah, there was definitely, sort of a liberal conservative
Yeah,
standoff,
yeah,
which has happened in our own denomination, has
yeah,
recently caused a split in our own denomination.
yeah,
Um, I don't know that I jumped right into that. I think it was there.
yeah,
I think it was kind of integral to the storyline and the wrangling for who's going to be the next pope.
yeah,
So, you had more than one faction, but kind of primarily, or more than two factions, but primarily it was liberals versus conservatives in the film,
yeah. And then it made me think on some level. It made me. I've never been a part of choosing a bishop in our denomination, but it made me think about that kind of zero sum game that like in this movie the primary there's quite a few factions, but primarily it's kind of the progressive cardinals want to make sure that the next pope is a progressive, and the conservative cardinals want to make sure the next pope is conservative. And there's very little talk about is this person a deeply spiritual person who's close to God? Like that never really comes up.
Are they the spiritual leader that the church needs?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
Like it's and
But
that
would it not have been, we should have thought of this ahead of time. Wouldn't it have been cool if we'd have gotten our new bishop to go and see this film and come on with us
that would
and
have been
have this discussion with us?
that
That
would have
would
been interesting. That would have been
next time.
But it made me think, like, I understand, look, I understand the concern. I understand the concern. If you are progressive, you want your leadership to be at least sensitive to your desires. And if you're conservative, I completely understand that you'd want leadership that are sensitive or even embrace your understandings of the world too. But it makes me really, really sad. I know this is fictional, but it makes me sad because I think it's very true to human beings that, and I feel like you see it in the political discussion that's going on now. There's not a lot of discussion about is this person a good human being? Um, is this person a good leader? More of the conversation is this person does this person agree with me? And I think that's scary for the church, but also for larger society. Is yes, you do want someone that sees the world similar to you. We all do, but shouldn't the bigger thing be that this person's ethical, or this person is someone that you can trust, or this person's someone that's close to God, or this person's a good leader? Like there seems
And
to be qualities that in a leader you want above just their political viewpoint.
well, and I think this film does itself something of a disservice to that idea
Yeah,
in that it creates kind of the two main figures, okay,
yeah,
that that are vying for it, or at least that you're watching initially. Sure. Tedesco is the conservative.
Yeah.
Bellini is the liberal.
Yeah.
What do you know about them besides that?
Yeah.
Nothing. They might as well be cardboard cutouts. So they really didn't develop those characters. The character that's well developed, Ralph Fiennes' character, is he's the dean of the College of the Cardinals. He's the one conducting or running the conclave.
Yeah.
And so you get a lot of insight into him and his faith struggles, which I think are really very human.
Yes.
He is by far the most human character in this film.
Yes.
And the warring sides are really could be anybody, because they're not fleshed out. You know nothing about them, which it's a little sad, because like you say, the reality is none of us are completely one way or completely the other way, right? That we're all a mix of complex ideas and thoughts, and
yeah. And I won't give this moment away in the movie, but I do want to kind of speak to there is a Latin phrase, and I will not be able to say it because I
the one you're talking about
studied Latin. But every time, and all of this, by the way, the structure of this is, from my understanding, historically accurate. This is the process the College of Cardinals goes through to pick a new pope, elect a new pope. But so whenever they're voting, every cardinal has to come up and say a phrase, and essentially it boils down to, I swear before God that this person is the person I truly believe should be elected pope. That's not what they say, but that's basically what they're saying. Am I correct in that?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I won't give it away, but there's this one moment, dramatic moment, where someone votes and you kind of feel like there's a sign from God that God was basically saying, you actually didn't
lied.
You lied about the fact you thought this was the right person, right? Yeah. But what's funny is, really, if you kind of pull out, you could argue almost every cardinal was lying, because most of the characters, we interact with about 6-7 cardinals, in the movie, and all of them are voting for the person they think will be able to be elected that's on their side. And so you could argue all of them are constantly voting not for the person they think is called by God to do this, but the person that they think is best suited to benefit their side of the argument.
Right. And it seems in some way that they're all a facade.
Yeah.
Right. Even the one who is eventually elected is a facade.
Yeah.
But I wanted, there was one thing, and before we get into more of the theme stuff, one part that I came across and I found that kind of erases the whole film.
Mm-hmm.
The one cardinal shows up at the conclave. Nobody knows him. Mm-hmm. He's not familiar to anybody. He has paperwork that's signed by the Pope who passed away.
Yeah. And this is actually true. A pope, if they feel like a cardinal is in danger, can make them I found out this a couple years ago. The pope
they can but if the pope dies, that person is not going to be accepted in the conclave, because the pope's not there to vouch for his signature.
Yes.
So that whole part, just erase that from the film.
Yeah. Yeah. So basically, there is a process by which, if a pope feels like a cardinal, pretty much it's basically in an area that's very against Christianity and where Christians are extremely persecuted, the pope can still appoint a leader there, can appoint a cardinal, but they can do it essentially without making an announcement. And so in the movie, you have this person show up.
The Latin phrase they use means in the chest, like keep your cards close to your vest kind of thing, Yeah.
My guess is my guess is that the Pope lets people know that are at least close to him, so that this person could. My guess is the Pope would not do this without letting more than just the person he did it know.
And nobody knew this
Yeah,
guy.
yeah, yes, yeah. That to me was there was part of me that's like, I'm sorry. I think the dean of the cat of the cardinal of the College of Cardinals would know about it.
Yeah.
You know,
Well, you'd hope at least,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
But uh, that that's just a little, I
yeah,
think, a little hitch.
yeah,
So you have to suspend your disbelief.
yeah,
Some things, like, I was making a comparison. I was talking to somebody about this film, and I was making a comparison to the AMC series Preacher,
yeah.
which is not based in any sort of reality.
No,
Okay, you suspend your disbelief.
yeah,
Um, and you have to do that with certain things in this film. Go with the story, and the story is worth it. Um, we wanted to talk about one of the things that particular cardinal said at one point, which was events outside of the conclave had affected events inside which is not supposed to happen, but it did.
sure. Yeah,
And so there was a lot of concern about and of course, both sides are trying to play this to their advantage.
yeah,
And then this one cardinal stands up and he says, the church isn't its traditions, and the church isn't its its
past.
progress. The
Yeah,
church is what we do next.
yeah,
Now, I think there's certainly a perspective to look at that where you go, oh, here we go,
yeah,
from, for the conservative guy like me, you go, oh, yeah, all right, here we go. But it's also really, I think, important because the church is what we do next,
well, it
you
speaks
know,
to that idea that we lose sight, that we all lose sight of as Christians, is the church is a living thing. The
full
church,
of living people.
yeah, and so he, the powerfulness of that statement, I feel like, is this idea that my grandfather, that was a independent Baptist minister, used to put it this way. He used to say all the time to his congregation, "You may be the only Bible someone ever reads,"
Only
and that's
Jesus someone
essentially
ever meets. I've said that. Yeah.
what this character was getting at when he made that comment. It's like people will know the church by what we do, to what we do right now, how we treat them right now. And in a powerful way, that's absolutely correct. Uh, Many people that have nothing to do with the church, they don't have anything to do with the church because they've read a lot of books and they've done a lot of research. It's because they were treated really poorly by a pastor, or they were treated really poorly by a congregation.
By the church person.
It's
Yeah.
it's by the experience that they had in a real moment in their life. And that's powerful to remember this idea of, um, Gustavo Gutierrez died last week, and I didn't hear about it till this week, but he was a liberation theologian, well known. But one of his ideas in his theology was that theology should be pastoral. And so his big thing was, he was like, um, basically, whenever you're dealing with people, you need to think about, how can I let them know God loves them in this moment? And that's essentially what that character was trying to get at, is the real function of the church is to help people encounter God, and we don't do that in anything more powerfully than in the next moment, in the next interaction, in the next feeding, in the next sermon, in the next worship service.
Yeah, and maybe we could even simplify that a little more and look to, that great Presbyterian theologian Fred Rogers,
Yeah,
who, when bad things happen, what did Fred Rogers said? His mother always told him, look for the helpers, look
yeah,
to the helpers.
right.
And is the church one of them? Is the church part of the people that are helping and making a difference in the world?
Yeah, I think for me, what I'll kind of take away from this movie is this idea of, how do we get out of this winner loser mindset and really start moving to a place where we look for deeply spiritual people, where we look for people that are really ethically sound, and wherever they are on the political spectrum, we gravitate to them because we know they're quality people. Like, I feel like we need to be more cognizant and more worried about, first and foremost, is this person ethical? Is this person a solid human being? Is this person someone who understands that they're a sinner and they're continuing to try to move toward God's grace? Or are they simply aligned with me and that's why I want them to be in the position they're in? You know,
Yeah. There's another thing we didn't discuss this ahead of time, but it really was just kind of occurring to me.
sure.
In the first, I guess it was a sermon, a homily, whatever that
Yeah,
Ray Fiennes' character gives, right?
yeah,
He talks about certainty,
yeah.
and he kind of makes, in a way, at least from my perspective, it seems like he's just kind of he's almost crapping on faith. You know what I mean? Like, well, if you're certain of anything, you're wrong.
Yeah.
Look, I get that. I get that from a certain perspective,
Yeah.
but I think, like a lot of several things in this film, it was a little heavy-handed for me.
Yeah, I
You
mean,
know,
I had a professor at seminary that used to say, I am certain about 80% of what I believe. I just don't always know what that 80% is. And I
look,
think,
I've always said the more I learn, the less I know.
yeah,
Right? I
I,
get
I,
that.
I do think, this can get us in a rabbit hole that would be take much longer than this taping will allow.
We have.
But I do think that I don't have any problem with people that say that there are some absolute truths, or there are some real definitions of, let's do the Christianity thing, because it's something that's been a part of our lives as Methodists for a while now. Okay. I always say to people, yes, there are boundaries to Christianity. There just are. There are things that make you Christian versus things that would not make you Christian. But I always warn people, don't build your fence too high, because if you build your fence too high, you'll be the only Christian. You know,
That's fair.
and one of the things I would encourage everyone to do is recognize that not everything you believe, even that you passionately believe, is an absolute. And that's the thing that has gotten us in trouble in the church and in the larger world, is not everything that you passionately believe and believe even is important is an absolute to what it means to be a good Christian or a good human being. And we have a tendency to go like, okay, I care about this, so other people that are good have to agree with me. And it's like you pile that too high and you're the only person that's left.
And the other part of that is you make the fence too high and you can't get out either.
Yes.
Uh,
Yeah. Um, Yeah, and I thought I mentioned this when we talked earlier, but I think it's worth thinking about. Um, but the Catholic Church is now going through a process called the Synod of Synodality. I think I'm saying that right. And they're basically it's actually kind of cool. They've tried to do the biggest worldwide survey of Catholics ever. And they're trying to get really kind of feedback from as many people as they can get. And one of the discussions is, should women be allowed to be deacons in the church? There's no conversation about allowing them to be priests, but there's conversation about allowing them to be deacons. And I know that a lot of conservative Catholics are really upset with the Pope because he recently took the report and said he wouldn't make any changes, kind of accept the report from the Synod of Synodality as is. And the Synod of Synodality says in there that there needs to be more discussion and reflection, and it's an open question still if women should be allowed to be deacons. And I think I struggle with, I'm not Catholic, so I don't want to jump on them, but there is a part of me that struggles with this idea of, don't just tell me that we haven't done this. Tell me why it would be wrong for us to start. And part of that for me is something that I struggle with is why don't you think women can be in leadership in church? I grew up in a congregation that didn't allow female leadership. They actually, my grandfather wouldn't allow any women to be a deacon or on the board of the church, any leadership roles at all. They couldn't teach unless they were teaching kids under the age of 12. Like there was this sense that women couldn't be leaders in the church. I feel like explain I never he never gave me a good explanation, and now I am part of a denomination that raises up female leaders, but I feel like sometimes it's worth pushing back and say, just don't tell me this is how we've always done it. Tell me why it's important to keep doing it that this way. Like give me a reason that's more than just we've always done it this way.
Don't give
Yeah.
me tradition just for the sake of tradition. Right.
Yeah, like
I get that.
tradition can clearly be a point in your favor. I'm not going to question that, but
Well, it
it's,
is part of the quadrilateral. We are
yeah, but
Methodists.
give me something deeper
Fair.
as well,
Yeah.
and I think what's interesting is I really am prayerful, I'll be honest, that they do accept at some point female deacons because, the way I read scripture, Phoebe was given the letter of the Romans to give to the Roman church by Paul. We understand that in that in that culture, if you were given a letter, that meant you read the letter and you were the person that was there to explain the letter, which essentially meant she was preaching about that letter. And so in that role, that's the role in the Catholic Church deacons can fill. Deacons can't administer the sacraments, but they can preach and they can, kind of instruct. And so there's a part of me that's like, I feel like you're missing out by not allowing women to do that. I'll be honest, and I would hope at some point the church may see it that way.
I've always, I mean, at least for my part in the UMC, I've always deferred to I don't I don't call people to ministry. God does.
Yeah,
So it's really not for me to say that you're disqualified from ministry because of your plumbing.
yeah,
You know, that's God's call, not mine.
yeah,
Um, and in a way, now it's a real clear thing in this film, right? That
mhm,
delineation between male and female,
yeah,
with the nuns, and the nuns are separate, and there is, again, spoiler alert, there is one part, where there's one of these bishops had
and
a
fair.
past affair, right?
Yeah.
Which is, disqualifies them. But uh, it's it's one of those things that I think is still going on today in the church. That discussion of women in leadership in the church, and to me, to me that's a dead subject.
Well,
Um,
again,
I've had too many. I've had too many effective female pastors
yeah,
to me. I've had too many effective female mentors to
yeah,
me. It's a dead subject as far as I'm concerned.
yeah. Well, I think it also goes back to clearly something that the director, and I'm guessing the author of this book, wanted to deal with, which is this idea of do we sometimes allow um, do we sometimes allow our own agendas to keep us from actually evaluating the spiritual and ethical dimensions of a person? We only see something that's wrong or right about them, and we don't actually investigate deeply who they are. And
And I think that
yeah,
might apply across genders, even
yeah,
to, you know, maybe ultimately the one bishop who was disqualified because of his 30-year-old affair,
yeah,
maybe he was the most qualified person. Well, I mean, he
yeah,
wanted it. Maybe his
yeah.
ambition disqualifies him. I don't know, but you don't ever get that sort of uh, depth of character development here.
Yeah. The one thing I definitely will say that I will be curious if you feel the same way. As a pastor, I really love whenever there's a movie where there are pastors or priests that are actually good human beings and not evil characters.
I'm 100% with you. Not either evil caricatures or complete buffoons.
Yes, and even though there were some kind of crappy behavior in this movie, I don't want to say there wasn't. Nobody that really was in this movie was someone that you would go away with and being like, "You're a despicable human being." You know,
The one guy,
yeah,
the one guy that they came up with the dossier on.
yeah.
I
But
don't
even
want to give too much away, but
yeah, yeah. But even him, you got this moment in the movie where you could see he seemed to really realize that he had done something wrong.
yes, towards the
And
end,
and
sure.
so he even had kind of a uh he basically had a moment of redemption. So even
Yeah,
in that, you had
even that, and that's, I think, at least refreshing from a pastoral perspective, the perspective of clergy, right?
yeah,
To see a film that includes clergy, that they're just human beings.
right,
Because
yeah,
please don't ever venerate me. I'm not there.
absolutely.
Don't do that,
Well, it's the idea, right, of that the church is a place for healing for sinners. And we too often forget that. This isn't a perfect place. It's basically a hospital for sinners.
Man. I think
Yeah.
we're going to run out of time, so we should probably
Yeah.
leave it there.
Yeah.
Um, Bottom line, it is a very good film.
It
It
is.
really is a very good film. It's got a few flaws. It can be, I think, personally, I think it's a little heavy-handed at points,
Mhm.
but I would see it again.
Yeah.
I'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
Um, the other thing, we should talk about what we're going to watch next, but I'm going to put this in your head for right now.
Yeah.
Later, so as people are seeing this, it's now November. Okay. It's not November yet while we're recording it. You know that, right? Uh, but as you're seeing it, it's November. So later this month,
Yeah.
um, there's a Dietrich Bonhoeffer film coming out.
Mm.
So I just
Yeah.
will think about that
Yeah. Absolutely.
when it gets closer, because
I love
that's
Bonhoeffer.
intriguing.
So
I like Bonhoeffer too.
yeah.
Um, Other than that, let's talk about next week and what can we watch for next week?
Well, it's
Um,
kind of your pick, right?
okay,
I kind of picked this one.
yeah, and I don't know. I seem to remember. I was just thinking about it today. How Jonathan does so well coming up with themes in films that you should not be able to do this with. Because I specifically remember going to the theaters and seeing the Harley Quinn movie. And
Mm.
Jonathan comes up with all stuff like that movie was terrible. How did you do that?
It's a gift.
Well, I appreciate it. I want to tell you, I
Oh,
appreciate it.
oh.
Um, I don't know. There's one out in theaters that my son wants to see. Maybe
Okay.
I should go see that because I've heard good things about it. Have you seen
Okay.
Wild Robot?
No, I actually wouldn't mind seeing that. So
So why don't we see that this week?
okay.
It's in theaters. I'll take my son if he can learn to behave himself, perhaps. Maybe he can go with me.
Is it
Um,
is it the son who's listening to us right now?
it is. It's the one
He,
sitting right
he,
there
he
as I'm
deserves a
recording
treat,
this.
then. He deserves a treat. So,
He deserves a treat for listening to us ramble for 20 minutes,
yep,
right?
he deserves a treat.
So, all right, friends. Bottom line, if you are so inclined, Conclave, very good film, well acted, well written, tense drama. Make your own decisions as to how much you enjoy the ending that we did not give away. Um, and this week we'll be watching The Wild Robot, which is out in theaters. And until next week, keep on finding God in the dark. We will see you all next Friday. Take care and God bless.
Bye.
Thanks for watching the Finding God in the Dark podcast. If you're enjoying these discussions, please consider hitting the like button down below or subscribing to follow along. We put out weekly episodes on Friday mornings, and we are so glad that you're finding this discussion of theology and film entertaining enough to follow along with us. Take care and God bless, friends.